right. Welcome to podcast number 18, I believe. And I'm here with Daniel, and we'll have you tell us a little about yourself. You've been on here with me before, as well as with Harrison.
Never can get both of you in the same room.
I know, right?
One day.
I know. I was so excited because today was going to be the day, and
Here we are.
We are.
So I'm an operating partner, obviously, at Lilly Roofing. Been working alongside you for about a year now, or 6 months.
February was when I came on board.
Okay. So coming in on a year.
Crazy.
It's wild. It's been quick. So I do that. Currently, I've been mainly focusing on recruiting, training, retention as far as for the roofing company. As well as expansion. So last time Harrison and I was on here, we talked about expansion.
Yeah.
We kind of covered that a little bit. Had some unrealistic fears, I think, going into that. So that's been kind of different. And now, like, really, I think the biggest part with expansion is worrying about the commute. Other than that, it's been pretty simple. I mean, the system's plug and play, like we've talked about. It works in, and especially since it's kind of already developed here. And I was like, man, this is like starting a new company. And I told Harrison, like, I've called him before, called Jake before. And I'm like, man, does anybody else not feel like we're just starting over, And that's kind of how it feels for a while. But as soon as it just opened up and I've got my new project manager over there, I've got our new sales teams kind of forming over there. And it quickly is becoming kind of like our West Monroe office.
Yeah.
It literally feels like we just did another onboarding class, and that's it. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool part. And you and I haven't even had an opportunity to talk about this, but let's say that, with expansion, for any of those that you guys are watching this. So, and Daniel and I are going to talk a lot about hiring today and some of the different steps. And we may do things a little bit different, but like, what's your hiring process?
Things we've learned.
Yes. So whenever, the interesting thing about an expansion is used to, when we think expansion, think McDonald's, right? You have to have a location. Well, now, depending on your business, you can have what we call is your hub. So let's say that, your hometown where you've started your business, that is your main hub. So you're hiring the admin and things like that out of that hub, and then you expand. And a lot of places, depending on the business, you don't have to have a physical location in the place that you're expanding. Now, some businesses need that, and you guys actually chose to go that path. Y'all bought a building. You're now in, is it Shreveport or Bossier?
Bossier.
They're in the
get
Bossier
corrected
area.
If you're over there. It's like West Monroe. Everybody like, oh no, we're in Bossier. So same thing.
same, different. So y'all did plan an office over there. So, but you have options to do both, and yet absolutely, it's now with the internet and technology. It's a lot easier to go into another area, and because you especially when you, like, a lot of times when you first expand close to home, close-ish. And that way, because you already kind of, that area, even if you don't know it as well as your home, you know it enough, right?
Absolutely.
You visited, it's kind of the same type of people.
Got clients in the area already.
Yeah. And that was the other good thing that you guys did is, and this is the other piece with anybody that's watching, when you look at expanding, you guys, before you went and bought a building or anything, you were like testing the waters. You built up some clientele, you built up some leads, and then you did some roofs there, and then you said, okay, now this is where we're officially going to open another second location.
And we did that with like the initial planning of Lilly Roofing, right? So like we didn't just come in and there's always an initial investment. I mean, and we know that there's always going to be that initial like dump you have to put in. But we also, when we started up Lilly Roofing, we led with revenue right off the bat. And we did kind of the same thing here. Like you said, tested the waters, kind of felt, because that was another thing. And Harrison and I talked about this last time I was on the podcast. We knew the market was different as far as value per roof and things like that, but you really don't know what that price point is. And so going into a new market, you might be just throwing away thousands of dollars per roof. And yeah, it's going to be great because it's going to seem like you're winning and winning and winning. But the logistics are different, right? So scheduling the deliveries, scheduling the pickups, scheduling our superintendent to go out and do quality control, all of those things had to kind of go into play on planning the office. But to your point just a minute ago, we honestly didn't have to buy an office over there.
Yeah.
With the technology we have in place, with the systems and the processes, with our CRM and everything else in place, I can see what everybody over there is doing without being there, you know? So it is super convenient being able to do that, because I had 2 guys that were doing inspections. They just finished up training last week at the Bossier office. I had those 2 guys. They were knocking out inspections. I guess that was Saturday, and I wasn't over there on a Saturday, you know? And had my son's birthday last week, and I was doing that. But it was a quick little phone call. They said, "Hey, Daniel, I'm looking at something on this roof." And I pulled it up on the app, and I was like, "Let's see it," without FaceTime or anything.
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, yeah, no, I know exactly what that is." I kind of guided them through the process, and they were able to close the deal because of that. And I was 2 hours away.
That's right. Yeah.
So.
So there's some really cool pieces. So, you know, one of the things, and we won't go into it on this podcast, but, you know, how do you know when it's time to expand? So that would be a great topic for later.
Really
but as
good
far as
I would love to hear both y'all's input on that.
okay,
for sure.
okay. Now, okay, so let's look. So today we're going to talk a lot about hiring. You do a lot of hiring. I do a lot of hiring. And everything from sales people to admin. We'll kind of spitball off of one another what was worked. And you actually asked a great question. So for you guys, if you're not familiar, there is an assessment that we tend to give people.
Yes.
It's called the DISC assessment, D-I-S-C. DISC stands for, and it's a behavioral analysis. And the interesting thing with the DISC assessment, I've heard it said this way, and I'm a big believer in this. So how do you know who somebody is behaviorally? Well, you spend a lot of time with them.
Right.
Well, what if I don't have that option? I've just met you. I'm trying to, I'm looking to hire you or looking to see if we're a good fit. Well, how do I do it quickly? I get an assessment. So with the DISC assessment, and D stands for, well, let me back up. So with the DISC assessment, you have it's D-I-S-C. Everybody has D-I-S-C, because you'll hear people go, "Oh, I'm a high D," or "I'm an I or S or C." We all have all of those. We can all utilize it. What we look for is which one do you lead with. And so a DISC is dominant. Those are those people that...
very direct.
Very direct. And so I have a whole training on that. So if you guys are interested in it, go to Olivia's approach. There's a whole training on the DISC assessment.
It's definitely worth a read up, for sure.
And then that's somebody that's very, influential. They're very friendly. They know everybody and everybody knows them. Then you have the S, and those are steady, stable. C's are compliant, cross all the, they like to dot all the I's, cross all the T's. And depending on the role, depends on what you would prefer their DISC to look like. Now, It is only one piece of the hiring, because I have had people do this where they're like, so I'll talk about Harrison. Whenever he hired a gentleman who he's been with him for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now. And when he initially got back his assessments, he came to me because he was a little bit worried because it doesn't show that he has a sales
I get that. I've seen a lot of those. Yeah.
And I said, so it's only a piece of the pie. So I said, okay, so talk with me through what's his background, what's he done? Well, he had a background of successful sales.
Okay.
So we absolutely, the way he does it sometimes might look a little different, his energy level, but I'm more interested in the success, the track rate, than I am in the behavioral assessment.
Yeah.
With that said, that behavioral assessment is going to help me communicate with them, as well as help me teach them how to communicate with people. So let's say that you have somebody that takes the DISC assessment and let's say they lead with a DI. typically we would say that is going to be a good salesperson.
Majority of our sales staff is DIs.
Yes. Well, so sometimes I'll have somebody that's actually great at sales, but maybe their behavioral style is a SC, and if we're not careful when we're explaining this, because they are around a lot of people that in the industry in sales that is the DI, and they start thinking like that means I'm less or I'm not going to be good at this. I'm like, whoa. No. Again, you may do it differently because the SC personality is probably not going to be as loud as a DI. So it looks different, and you can absolutely be successful in sales with it. So we look at the first net a millionaire or gross a million. I'm sorry, in Keller Williams Realty back when I was with them was Cal Carter. Shout out Cal, and he was an SC behavioral style. He didn't like to talk. I mean, which he loves people, but he very much one-on-one. We would say he's more introverted than extroverted.
Right.
And he came from a farming background. He knew that he wanted to build a sales organization. And so he identified a niche and a way, and he built the team through others. And so absolutely, there's no... So I say this to tell you and everybody, don't look at it and go, oh, well, they're a SC, they're not a good salesperson, or oh, they're a DI, they're not a good admin. Not necessarily, but it does tell us some things about them, how we want to communicate with them, what they might be like, and how do we learn about one another.
So I actually feel like you're describing one of our guys to a T. And this is a perfect example of this. I used to be super strict in my hiring process. I was looking for Daniel Gilley after Daniel Gilley. Mm-hmm. Like I was solely focused on that. I had like tunnel vision on it. And I missed a lot of possibly great hires. Once we started doing the DISC assessments and I started kind of like diving into like each personality type, yes, you kind of see it. Like I knew this particular guy I'm talking about was he's an SC actually. And I knew he was an SC. He was very quiet in training, asked a ton of questions. But from the first day, I mean, like when I told him, hey, you've got to follow up at this, 24 hours. If he finished talking to that guy at 8 o'clock on a Friday, he was going to call him at 8 o'clock on a Saturday. Yeah. Like it was 24 hours on the dot, and that's where his success comes from. Mm-hmm. And because we did DISC assessments, I actually was able to like kind of coach him on that, and I understood like this guy's a compliance guy. Like, and 100% that stayed true, and he is still in the top of one of the top guys in our organization consistently. If he's not on the top, like on the leaderboard, like if he's not number one on leaderboard that month, he's definitely going to be like in the top 3.
Yeah.
But everybody else in the organization pretty much is DI.
Yeah.
But I missed a lot of hires early on trying to feel people out because I was like, man, this dude's too quiet, and I don't want to waste my time, trying to teach him. Or I don't want him to like waste his time. He's coming in here and he's not going to be able to have the conversations like I would have with somebody. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, no, it's really neat kind of seeing how there's not a cookie cutter for sales.
No,
you know, and everybody thinks there's a cookie cutter for sales. Yeah. When you start breaking down your salespeople, there's such a wide array of like characteristics, personality types, and everything else, and it doesn't determine their success.
No, and because a lot of times So again, if we talk the DISC assessment, if you're in sales, and this is the interesting thing, think confirmation bias. Well, if you're in a sales room, a lot of time you're in a room with a lot of people that are DIs. And so the challenge becomes, it's just like with every, the challenge becomes is you now see the world, how DIs see the world. Well, the challenge with that becomes the majority of non-salespeople, so like the majority of the world is SCs or some combination. Well, so guess what? The way that I might sell to a D is different than how I might sell to an S. Well, guess what? If I don't even realize the world is different, then I can't see what I'm missing. So that was one of the big eye-openers in my, as I was coming up in sales was before the DISC assessment, I was winning really big with some people and losing really big with other people. And we go through the disc assessment. I'm learning, and my brother at the time said, "Do you think maybe this is part of the challenge?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like so,
It absolutely is.
absolutely." So So now, what I gear, my training or when I'm selling something, you want to gear it toward, okay, because this is the other interesting thing in sales. Now, not necessarily hiring, but if you look at, let's say, we'll use married people as an example. They're typically opposite.
Right.
So let's say, one is a D and one is an S. Well, I've got to be able to keep that D's attention by going quick, telling them this. And the S wants to know that I care about them. And if I feel salesy, they are going to withdraw, and I may not ever even notice that. So being able to talk with both in a way that brings both of them into the conversation, huge in your sales and how well you do. But going back to hiring, so you also asked the question, you were like, well, how soon can you do the disc?
Right.
So I'm actually a big believer in, I'll do two scenarios. Let's say one is I've run a bunch of ads and I have people coming in. I'm going to give you that as an example. And then the second one would be if there's somebody I know that I want to recruit. So maybe they're already in sales and I want to go after them. So let's say that I opened up another company and I was like, you know what? I want Daniel on my team. I'm going to call you, even if I don't know you. I'm going to call you, invite you to coffee, something like that. And we can do a whole podcast or multiple podcasts around recruiting, but let's say that you're like, yeah, I'll go grab coffee with you. And so it may sound something like this. I'd call you up and I'd say, hey, Daniel, Alivia Roberts. Haven't had an opportunity to meet you, but Harrison said that you're a cool dude and I should get to know you. Like he just brags on everything. Yeah. And when at this point, I might not even say that because you may fit this role or you may not, but part of, if you're recruiting, your job is to get to know everybody because they might have a seat on the bus here. You might be able to hook them up with somewhere else. And then because later you'll have a seat on the bus, right? Right. So I'd love to, buy you a cup of coffee. And because I'm using somebody's name that they also respect, they're more likely to meet with me. And right. I'm not selling them anything or anything like that. And so he says yes. And I'm saying, now, Daniel, would it be okay with you? Have you ever taken a behavioral assessment? And he says yes or no. And I'll say, what I found is if you would do me the honor of doing this assessment, I'm going to send it over to you. It'll take you about 15 minutes. And then I'll go through it with you when we meet. I think you'll get a lot out of this, and it'll just help us get to know each other quicker, better, and then you'll be able to take this back and utilize it with your your sales and your company as well. Would you be willing to give me an extra 15 minutes and I can send it over to you?
They absolutely would.
Okay. Yeah. So now
it adds value to them even if they're not doing anything with you.
That's right. And I can kind of create a place in an organization or future organizations with that. And so that would be immediately. Okay. I had one gentleman that I used to work with that it was awesome. Interesting enough, like 2 years after this, he got married. I have not had an opportunity to ask him if he used this on his wife, but he used to say when he would start dating a girl, he would have her take the assessment. And again, it's not to rule people.
It's a bit much.
Well, no, not really.
I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, it's like, could you imagine going on the date with someone and they're like, hey, by the way, I need you to take this real quick. Yeah.
He was a great communicator, so I'm sure he said it in a way that, but it really.
He sold him on it for sure.
He sold him on it. But it really is like, we've had everybody in our family take it because it lets you understand people a little bit more. And that's what communication is do I understand where you're coming from? So if you think about somebody that leads with their D, their emotion is quick to anger. Their biggest fear is being taken advantage of. So if I know that when I'm selling, so let's say I'm selling to Daniel, if he ever feels taken advantage of, not necessarily by me, but let's say that, so as a realtor, let's say that I'm representing you as the seller. If you ever feel like the buyer's taking advantage of you, the deal is like, so I'm going to make certain that in the conversation, I'm going to be looking out for that. The other piece is, if you are, and then quick to anger. So let's say that I call Daniel and I tell him something. If I didn't know that his emotion is quick to anger, and I tell him something and he comes back at me with, "Oh my God, that's stupid, I can't believe," without knowing that, I think,
Deal's done.
but I think he's mad at me, right? And so now I go into either freak out mode or whatever. Well, if I know that that's just an emotion, like a thing, he's going to get it out of the way, and then we can have and again, I'm not saying let anybody yell or scream at you, but I mean, but just, I know that now I'm going to let you breathe through it, and then I'm going to say, okay, so where do you want to go from here? And now I'm not taking all this emotional thing and making it about me, because he probably didn't even realize that he sounded angry right there. And their biggest fear is rejection. So if I'm working with somebody who, is, and I want to make sure that they don't feel rejected. And if for some reason they push back, I'm going to look for what happened that they felt that way. An S, they want to feel safe. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving them the information they feel safe. A C, remember we talked about they want to dot all I's, cross all T's. I'm going to give them factual information. I might be able to get away with a D to go, let's say if somebody leads with their DI, I might be able to get away with, everybody loves this.
Yeah.
You say that to a C, they're like, who's everybody? Well, if you don't have the criteria to back it up, they're going to think that you might be lying. I actually have now this is not proven, this is my belief. I think sometimes when people don't like salespeople or they feel taken advantage of, whatever, I think sometimes it's because you've got somebody that's probably some type of DI combination talking to somebody that's a SC combination, and DIs tend to talk real fast.
Not be very detailed.
Not be very detail oriented. So this person over here is feeling like, wait, where are you pulling the wool over my eyes? And so if I know what behavioral style you are, then I can slow down and make sure I meet you where you're at. And the cool part is the more you study this, the more you can just tell what somebody is, because it's an observable language. So I can tell even without the assessment. The assessment helps. Now, real quick, so that would be if I was recruiting you like that. Let's say that you had filled out, I'd run an ad for an admin. In that sense, there's a process that I'm going to have them go through where, I find out about their skills, things like that. Do they have a background? And then I'm going to ask them to do the assessment prior to our first meeting.
Gotcha. And see, so I like it both ways as well. The admin, I do like following a very similar process whenever we do our hiring, just so they can kind of see the ins and outs of how we hire our salespeople. So it's just, very consistent across the board. So whenever they're hiring or when they're going through the onboarding process, they're like, oh, this is our system. That's what we've done historically. And earlier, so when I asked the DISC assessment, my biggest thing with that is I, again, have learned that there is no cookie cutter. So, like, now I have a very open mind to an SC salesperson, which is something I used to not have. Shout out to the one salesperson that really changed my mind on that. But now we have 3 of them in our organization that are SCs. And I'm like, every time I'm just like, man, I can't believe this guy is out producing. But again, like it's about the training style too for us, because part of that recruitment and part of the retention, especially at the onboarding, like the new hires, things like that. We'll hire 8 people, and essentially we used to only keep 25%. Now we're fortunate enough that the past 2 onboarding classes were at 75%, which is great. It means our recruitment process is getting a little better. Our onboarding process is getting better, but also I feel like We've had systems there, but now like they're a little more defined. So when the people are hiring on, they know what we expect of them in their first like month, first 60 days, and first 90 days. So that's kind of changed a lot for us. But with those disc assessments, I'm interested in getting with you and like getting those kind of earlier in our recruitment process. So not only do I know what kind of training I've got coming up, what kind of people I'm going to be talking to, what kind of people I'm going to be training out like that, but also so I know kind of what team, because one thing we've done recently with the recruiting and onboarding process is we have team leaders now. So now that we have our project managers, they come in, they're with me for 30 days, they're bumped over to a team, still with me kind of shadowing for up to 90 days. But during that team change, the crossover or whatever, there's some people that will work really well with some of our project managers. And then there's other people that if I were to put even one of the better project managers with them, they'd be like, no, man, I'm not working with this guy. And it's nothing negative about those people. It's just, again, to that point of communication, I struggle and I've I wouldn't say I've mastered this, but I've really been working hard to kind of develop being able to communicate across all of those different styles. But even me, I struggle sometimes whenever I'm working with a whole lot of SCs all at the same time, just getting my point across and making sure they're understanding the information, making sure that, I'm giving them enough information. Because I also am one of those people that just talk really fast. I'm like, I just want to get this information out there and get it to you. We'll talk about it later, or we'll elaborate on it. I'll ask your questions after this, but so I definitely want to incorporate the DISC assessment earlier in the process. And you kind of opened my eyes to DISC assessments. I had taken so many personality exams and personality assessments in the oil and gas industry, in the construction industry. I think even the military had us take one at one time. Yeah. But I had taken so many of them that I honestly, I never really considered it in a small business setting, and it's so helpful, onboarding, recruiting, retention, everything, because if I have a class of SCs, let's say we have 3 SCs that come into my class and we're doing the initial onboarding training. And I teach them just like I would of a class of DIs. One, their energy, they're feeding off each other, right? So they're all, as soon as I step out of the room, Alivia, do you feel like he kind of explained that well enough? You think he knows what he's talking about, And so there's a lot of ways that can go negative. There's a lot of ways it could go positive. But it gives me a heads up in that process that, hey, look, I have 3 SEs coming in this class. My format's still going to stay the same. The curriculum's going to stay the same. The modules are all the same. But it is very much going to be catered more to this and more to the processes more than anything, because I know what made my SCs successful in our organization is processes. Yeah. You give them the processes, they run with it. They don't alter from it. They don't try changing it, and they're successful in it. Yeah. The DIs, you kind of, I hate to say it like this, but a DI is going to play with it. He's going to try to, do his own thing every now and then.
Creative. Exactly.
And so I feel like with the DIs, you can be a little less because they're going to be kind of evolving it into their own thing anyway.
Well, they don't, a lot of times with the DIs, they don't need to know the why behind it.
Right.
And so you just go do that. Now, funny enough, one of Charlie, hey, Charlie, if you're watching. So one of the
is that one of your brothers?
No. So Charlie was, he worked for me for 3-4 years. Okay. And whenever I sold a business, he actually went to work for them as well. So which was really cool, because when you can sell a business and say, look, and you want to keep this person because they do everything. And so but he was awesome. But part of it, like when I hired him, he is basically, he was all C. And at this point, I'd got pretty good about hiring people and what I was looking for. And I also had somebody in the organization already that was like the SI. And he very much a C behavioral style. So if you think about a C behavioral style, especially if that's what they lead with, they want to know the why, they want to know the what. The interesting thing is a lot of people, even in my organization when I hired him, they were very much like, and everybody liked him, but like, is he really going to be able to do this? And I said, during training, you may feel like he's not moving fast enough because he's processing. I said, promise you, and now he also had a track record, but promise you, if we do the things, you're going to, later, he's going to do it faster than anybody.
And they're asking so many questions also, so it kind of raises the, again, to that point, they're like,
and they'll ask,
he's just not getting it.
That's right, because they'll ask questions that have never even occurred to somebody that's a DI. Well, anyway, so Charlie goes through this. Well, one of my favorites is he actually ended up being, I would almost prefer him to answer my phone than a salesperson. And you go, wow, Olivia, because this was the cool part. So like whenever I would go to lead generate, I would actually forward my phone to his phone. We had a desk phone at the time, and with Ring Central, which is a whole nother thing. But anyway, so he would, but I didn't want to be interrupted whenever I was calling. But if I called you and you called me back, I didn't want you to get my voicemail either. Yeah. So I'd be calling. Well, he has no idea who's calling me back, because I could have been calling on people I knew that day. I could have been calling on people I'd never met, whatever. Well, so he would get, the phone would ring during that time period, and he would answer, thanks for calling the Roberts team. This is Charlie. How may I help you? And so sometimes they would be a little bit, if they knew me, I just missed a call from Alivia. If they didn't, hey, somebody just called me from this number. And we wrote it out, we practiced it out, and he would, because he would, like you said, they follow system. He followed the system,
Get
and he
all
would
the
say,
info.
and he would say, oh, Olivia's actually on the other line. She's right, she probably called you about, are you thinking about buying a house or selling a house? I'm sure that's what she called you about. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, like I'm thinking about buying. Oh, okay, great. Well, tell me a little bit. He takes all the information. Now, during my call time, and he could literally say, oh, well, she's going to be wrapped up at 11. Would it be okay for her to call you back between 11 and 12? Yep. Boom. I call back 11, 12. I mean, it was freaking awesome.
It's as though you answered the phone yourself.
Yes. And so I would finish, like, let's say that I made 100 dials during those couple hours. I talked to, 10, 15 people. I would come back in the office. He would hand me a list of people to call back with times, call them back. Dude, I mean, it was so awesome. And the same thing, if they were like, because of the process, if they were like, I ain't calling, I don't know how you got my number, he's going to say, hey, I appreciate it, dude. He wouldn't say dude, but, hey, I apologize. We had your information. I'm not sure. I'll definitely check with Alivia, but if you're not looking to buy or sell, we can definitely remove you from the system. We won't call you back. Now he's also managed that, and of course he goes in the system, deletes and all that stuff. But yeah, and so most people would have been like, now, interesting enough, toward the end, right before the year before I sold the business, I went from 3 admin to Charlie and a part-time guy, Mason, who Mason worked for us for years. We actually call him another Roberts. He started with us when he was like 16 in high school. But yeah, so like that's but it is building out. So I didn't just toss him the phone and say go like I might have with you, right?
Right. But I also wouldn't have got all the information, just to be clear.
That's right. Like the salesman might have been so busy trying to sell that they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so called, but it wasn't.
I would get their phone number for sure in case we got disconnected, name, and then other than that, you're going to have a whole bunch of like random notes about what they wanted. But yeah, so you said you hired one of them while they were in high school, right?
Yeah. He's 16.
So that kind of brings me to another thing I want to talk about, since we are kind of talking about recruiting. I want to talk about how you find people, and I want to kind of put that in contrast compared to how we found people. So finding people, what have you found to work the best, especially in regards to sales? Because it's hard to find salespeople, and I find that Indeed, whether running sponsored ads or whatever, you're always going to have the people that just come through and apply. They're just filling out and trying to get any call back they can. So, like, how are you kind of finding them, and how are you rolling them out up into that?
Okay, so, and interesting enough, great question. I actually did at the a class on this at the chamber a couple weeks ago, and we did record it. And so I'm gonna put it on Olivia's approach.
Awesome.
And
check it out.
But so basically, I have a step by step. So number one, Yes. So there is a program, and I cannot think it off the top of my head, but there's a program, or there's like an Indeed, but there's a program you can, not a program, but there's a company. You can tell them about the ad. They then help you build it out, and they run it on all the platforms.
Gotcha.
Okay. So,
Because Facebook has hiring now, Indeed does, and all that.
yeah.
So.
And so you can manually do it, but if you have an opportunity it's one of those, you're going to pay with time or money.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have the time, pay somebody to do this. If you don't have the money, then you do this, right? You just do it after hours and nights or whatever, but you can put it all across the thing. So,
that company, not to cut you off, do they filter out a lot of the candidates as well, or they just do the post? Because both of them take a lot of time.
Yeah. So no, they'll do all the posting out, and they'll set everything up. So you know how a lot of times it'll say like record a video for me, do this, that, or the other. Like
we do pre-recorded phone answers.
Yes.
So we do that in our hiring process.
Yeah. So so a lot of that can be done through the process. Now this is something that, so we'll break it down in two different ways. I'm going to say like, let's say you're looking to make a hire. I always want to take two-pronged approach. Number one, people that I don't know, I'm going to run ads and all that. The thing is most of the amazing people that I want already have a job. So they probably are not on Indeed or those type of ads.
Right.
Now, not because sometimes you can get some really amazing people, and yet that's something,
We've been really successful at it.
And so, so I definitely say you want to run all those. And then you also want to focus on people that you know that know people. So we're going to talk about that, like the database and the Mets and that in just a second. But let's say that, so I run the ad. Couple of things that I want to make sure of. A lot of times people put way too much stuff in the initial ad. What I mean by that is if you give me a 2-page list of duties, let's say that we're hiring for an admin, a director of operations, or even sales, and if there's something on there that I don't know how to do or something, and I say me, but whoever's looking at that, they might go, oh, I don't, that doesn't apply to me. I shouldn't even, apply for that, right? So now you do, if this is not an entry-level position, let's say I'm hiring for an admin and I want somebody with a few years of experience, I would put that in the ad, not an entry-level position.
Yeah, because even if they don't have experience on it, what a lot of people do, and I'm speaking from experience because I've applied before on like Indeed and LinkedIn and things like that, I've seen certain programs or software in there, and I was like, yep, apply, and immediately started diving deep into that program and software so I could have at least a base. Yeah. And I would just tell them flat out, the hiring manager, like I'd be like, hey, Alivia, again, hey, I appreciate your time. I did notice that y'all use this AutoCAD software for your 3D. I have never used that brand specific. I've used something similar in this regard and move through the process that way. So, putting detailed stuff in there for people at a higher level for sure. Yeah. Entry level, I agree with you. Yeah. You want to say kind of baseline. Yeah.
And again, and this is the other piece that you want to make certain. So I'll use an example of my brother. So when my brother got into sales, if you would have looked at him when Chuck got into real estate, in matter of fact, a lot of people did not think he was going to be successful when he first got in because he was a horse trainer. He had a handlebar mustache. He wore Wranglers and jeans.
That's my realtor. Like, that's who I'm picking.
and you think I sound country, like he sounded country, right? And I listened to myself yesterday on a video I did at my house with my dog, and I was like, what? I've really got to start going up north a little bit. The southern accent I've always had it, and it's come back heavy. Well, anyway, so we go to, so you don't over put in what you want. Now tell them, you want them to know, but don't overdo it. And then my goal is to get at least 100 applications and then sort them. So kind of going back to, like, let's say I'm looking for sales. I don't want to rule out somebody like Chuck, who was, if you looked at him and he said, well, I'm a horse trainer. And he had a great success rate. He had trained some horses that had won world and things to that effect. But if I was looking at him for a sales job, unless you know the horse business and that they are always selling and swapping and all that, you'd be like, can he sell stuff though? Well, he'd been selling and swapping horses and all that for a year. So he's actually a great salesperson.
Right.
And so, but if you didn't know that, or if you said you had to have sales experience and that person that was a horse trainer didn't think of them as sales experience, or you look at me, my background before I got into sales, I managed a daycare. We had like 260 kids. It's kids are kids. And I started there at the front desk, and then I became a teacher in the
at
baby
260,
room.
you don't know if you're picking up extra kids at some point, and so there might be new kids in the room, and you're just like, did we start the day with this kid?
Well, and we had, and so, so if you would have asked me, like, are you a salesperson? And I also managed at the ballpark. It was an adult slow pitch softball park, which is freaking awesome, but I missed that. I played and I managed up there, and I umpired some. So I did a little bit of all this, right? And yet, if you'd have said, like, are you a salesperson? I would have said no. Now, what I understand, though, is so whenever a parent comes in to tour the facility, guess what I was doing? I was selling. If that, if I didn't use the right words, they weren't going to be, this was in the 2003, 2004, and it was $2, $4, $6, $8, $900 a month at that time for an infant to come there. So you're dropping $1,000 a month. You are picky. Now it's way more expensive, I'm sure.
Yes.
But so if you would have asked me, because that was my big concern when I got into this, I was like, I'm not a salesperson. And I still don't actually consider myself a salesperson, because we talk about the behavioral style. I'm a DIC. So that's what I lead with over the line. So I'm more systems, and it works, but but I don't like to just wing it until I get good at what I do, and then I'm fine winging it. And so, but again, so if you would have said sales, I'd have been like, I don't do that, because I did not consider this as sales.
The
and somebody
sales
would have lost a great salesperson, right? There was one guy, Zach Stevens, who's an amazing salesperson. He's an agent. They have he and his wife now. They have tons of investment property. He's a realtor. He's a really great guy. And I lost out the opportunity to hire. He picks on me about this when he was, 19 or 20. He interviewed with me, and I didn't hire him. Now, this was before, I really knew what I was doing as far as the hiring, and I could kick myself.
Next time he picks on you about it, though, be like, it was probably the only reason you were successful was because I didn't hire you.
That's right.
Because a lot of times that's why people step up, So.
I'm like I said, he was young and all that, and I don't remember. He may have been a great fit, but not a fit for the role that I was hiring. I don't even remember all that. But you just think about so going back to wide enough range that you can catch enough people, get enough people into your net. Now, I'm a big fan of, right now, when you talk to people that are interviewing for jobs, I also have to say, we have to be really respectful of their time, because if you're not careful, you could do, 2 or 3 hours worth of work and you don't even get a call back. That to me is not cool. So I'm a big fan of running the ads. I want to, let's say, when I say 100, it could be 75, 120, but just about a week. If you're running ads on an Indeed or something, you're going to get that in about a week. Yep. I want to go through them, and I'm going to go through them like this. I'm going to say, and Monica Reynolds taught me this years ago, and the way that you do this is you think 4 categories, and you go, okay, let's say that you're hiring for a certain position, and this person, the first thing I'm going to do is look at longevity that they've had jobs. Now, if you're in college, I'm going to count that as your longevity in a job, right? I'm also going to look to see if maybe you have a military spouse or something. But if you've never had a job longer than 2 years, unless it's because you're young, you're not going to be with me longer than 2 years. And depending on the role, that might rule you out. Yeah. So I'm going to first get rid of those applications. Then I'm going to look and go, okay, who actually, so now I've narrowed them down, and now I'm going to go, okay, who has experience in sales? If I'm looking for the sales. If I was looking for an administrator, I'd look who has experience in that. So now I'm going to kick those out. Now I'm going to get rid of the people that, so what did I say? I said long-term or longevity, they have experience. And you just kind of, there's two other pieces I can't think of the top of my head right now, but like so now I narrowed it down. So like you take 100, now I've narrowed it down to, let's say, 12. Now those 12, I'm going to ask to answer the interview questions, depending on which sales or admin, there's a few like things that I have them do. And that's going to narrow it down. And then, because my goal is to narrow, depending on how many I'm looking to hire, but like right. A lot of times if I'm looking to hire one, I'm looking to narrow it down to like the top 3 to 4. Then those 3 to 4 I'm going to meet with. Now, anybody that I have to do a lot of stuff, I am going to make sure that I'm communicating with them. Hey, thank you so much for doing these pieces. We've decided to go a different way. Can I keep your information on file? Or just communicate with them. Like nobody likes just like, I did all this stuff and I don't even get like a F you, like give me something.
Telling me I didn't get it.
Yeah, email something. Now, I will also say, also keep in mind with like Indeed, and I'm sure you've run into this, a lot of people does not check their email. That is not, so that's just part of the generation. So meet them where they are. So text works really well, things like that. So now that would be like, hey, I want this big reach. The other piece is you want to make sure, so running that ad, like let's say that you're a business and you have a database. You can be a hairdresser, a roofing company, realtor. Do you have everybody that you know into a customer relation manager or something in your email, whatever? They're all going to get an email that says, this is what I'm looking for. I'm going to put it on social media. I'm going to make it funny and make it stand out. What am I looking for? And then I'm going to call the influential people in my world that might know somebody. So if I was looking for an admin, I'm going to call Daniel and I'm going to say, hey, Daniel, I know you know a lot of people. I'm looking for this type of person. Who might you know that might fit this role? And he's going to say something like, I can't think of anybody, or you can't have Jamie, who works with you.
Never can have Jamie.
Or you're going to say, but I actually interviewed this lady, or I have a mom, an aunt, a cousin that like, they love their job, but they fit that description. I'm going to go, you know what? Can I get their information? Because this might not be the right role for them. And yet I'd hate to, not even talk to them about it because, maybe it's better than what they've got. So a lot of times people will do that. We're like, this person would be great, but they love their job. Well, I love working with people who love their job.
And I interview a lot of people that are exploring a new opportunity. They're like, hey, I'm really interested in sales. I actually met with a guy for lunch about 2 weeks ago. And he was coming from basically a technician line of work, and he asked me, he's like, hey, can we just meet? I really am interested in sales. And after meeting with him, I told him, I said, man, I think, you could definitely do sales. There's going to have to be a certain level of like commitment and change in lifestyle or ultimately to fit that, just going off of what he told me in that one setting. But if somebody were to call me today and be like, hey, was there a, technician, honestly, probably even an administrative role. Like he probably would be good for certain administrative roles in certain organizations. But it was because of that interview. And so to your point of speaking with influential people and people you might know that know a lot of people, it's not so much that I know a lot of people, but I do the onboarding and hiring process 40 times a month with different people, So, and out of those 40 phone calls, whether it's with me or my administrative staff before it gets to me, we come across so many people that's just not a good fit at the time for their role, or we're not a good fit for them in that role. And instead of just making a move or trying to find somewhere for them to fit at that time, like they definitely go in a stack. And it's like, hey, next time we hire for this position, we're calling them and they might be somewhere else. It might cost us a little more, but this is a perfect candidate.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, and that's because sometimes, like, there's a gentleman that, gosh, 2015, 16, something like that, 17. I led a class in Oregon, and he came through it, and he's amazing. He's a rock star. I only know his wife through him. She seems like, and I told him back then, I was like, I don't know what, but at some point I think I want to do some type of business with you. I have no idea what. I don't know when. And he's like, same. So like, he's on my list as somebody that one day, right? Yep. And so absolutely, you'll have these. So, and then of course your database, because, and then the people that work for you, letting them know what you're looking for. Now, this is the interesting thing is sometimes you're going to have somebody that says, like, I know this guy and he's successful, but he's not going to fit in with our culture. And I'm going to say, now, I definitely want to take that into consideration. And yet sometimes, it could be y'all are different behavioral styles. So you think that, but it's not true, right?
Right.
It could also be that we are, that what you're seeing is like what's going on in their organization.
Exactly.
So let me at least talk with them and see, like, letting your people know, like, don't prejudge. If you think that there's somebody that that's good at this role, or they might need a new environment to flourish in, let me talk with them. Let's go through the process. They may or may not fit, because everybody's not going to be a fit for me, and that's okay. That doesn't mean they're bad. I told the story of Jade, who is one of my favorite people in the world, but we worked together at a company. When I left, when she decided that she didn't want to be there any longer, she approached me, and I said, absolutely. I hired her. It didn't work out at the time because I was in flux and things like that. So, but she's still amazing. And so whenever she had an opportunity or somebody, so she and I talked about she was going to find another job, and used me as a reference. They called. I gave her a rave review. She went to work for them. She worked with them for 2 or 3 years, and then got recruited to somebody else. And that person called me, and I was like, they were like, what do you think? I'm like, yes. So just because it didn't work out for me, now some people have not worked out for me, and I'm like, yeah, they're not. But the role wasn't correct for her, and I wasn't the right leader for her at the time because of what I originally thought I wanted, and then where I was going, it changed. It just life happens. That stuff changed. But like her, I've been trying to hire Charlie back in some version of my life for, I don't know, 5 years. And right now I don't have a place for him. But immediately, but every time I'm going to hire somebody, I'm like, Charlie, and he's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, all right, no harm, no foul. But and so, so a lot of times some of the best people are going to be people that already have a job. And so sometimes you may hire the person for the role for now, but sometimes it might take you 2-3 years to recruit that person that you want, because they are happy. Yeah. They are getting fulfilled. But one day, if they aren't, I want them to know me. So that's the two different versions of hiring. Yeah,
and a lot of times I find that when we want that person, right, the reason they're so desired is because they are happy.
That's right.
And
they're
I
great
don't mean that in a negative way.
No.
It's just it's a product of their environment. So we're really big on that. To your point earlier, where you're like, hey, don't prejudge, don't come up with judgments on these people. Because a lot of times it might not seem like they're going to fit the culture because of the environment they're in right now. They're kind of isolated. They might really, really want to be in a workplace like Lilly Roofing, and they probably would thrive there. But they also might be going through something where they're at a workplace they're just not happy at. Yeah. And so they're just like, man, if I could just do anything to get out of here. Yeah. But we see them in that, and we see them in that negative light. And so a lot of times it'll be a complete turnoff. So for us, talking about Indeed and stuff and kind of our recruitment process, we have, much like you, I matured a lot over the hiring process and the recruitment process. I used to have such a small window of like people that I would select from. I was constantly trying to, have you ever heard the 10, 60, 30 rule? So I was constantly trying to recruit the 10%, the top 10% of salespeople. And there's just not a lot of them out there because the top 10% of salespeople are either happy in their organization. And that's not to say you can't get them, but the odds of getting
Well, those
them,
are going to be the people that you may get them, but it could be 2, 3, 10 years
Yep.
in the making.
getting
right?
them consistently is just not doable. You know, like you're not going to be able to go recruit the top 10% of salespeople 6 months in a row and get all of them on board. It's just not going to happen. So there's a 10%, there's the 60%, which is your average Joes, right? Your mediocre, and then you're the bottom 30%. So I've designed a recruitment process to ultimately phase out that 30%. The way in which we do this, we do keep our posts relatively simple for sales. You know, it's not very detailed. I do want to see if you have a basic understanding of the technology. We want to make sure that you're going to be able to use your phone. You have a reliable means of transportation, the basics. I mean,
That's right. Absolutely.
and then right after they complete that, they get an automated email to take 2 or 3 assessments, depending on the outside or inside sales role they're doing. So they'll take 2 or 3 assessments. That phases out a lot of people. Even in that 60%, they're like, I'm not doing these assessments. And they're just skill-based assessments. They take approximately 10 minutes. But there's so many people, again, in sales in particular, that go and apply. They just shotgun their resume everywhere. So it'll phase out a lot of those going through the 60%. So that'll put you at a solid, like, you know, for us, our good applicants, like if we have a good applicant class, we look at it for about 50. So we look at about 50 applicants that went through the assessments. They've done all the things. And then after they've completed those written assessments, it sends them one last phone recorded assessment where essentially they have to go in. And this is all done through Indeed. We don't do any job sponsors or anything, any sponsored ads. We just post monthly. So it pops back up on the new. But then we do the pre-recorded phone. So that tells me, again, it not only gives me an insight to their communication abilities. Super awkward, by the way. I had to do one. and so I kind of stole that from a company back 2012 or 13, an oil field company I was hiring on with. They had 16, which we only do 3, but they had 16 pre-recorded phone responses. And it was like, press 1 when you're complete. I'd press 1 and listen to it. I'd be like, God, that sounds terrible. But yeah, so we do the recorded phone. So it gives me insight on how their communication is. Lets me know who I'm talking to, how they sound, how they present themselves. And a lot of times, not necessarily to judge them, you know, based on our culture or communication type, but a lot of times if someone just goes on there and they just sound kind of blah and they don't bring an energy to the table, I don't want to necessarily reach out to them or recruit them at that time. Just because one of our core values in Lilly Roofing is energy. So we have our serve core values, and the second core value, the E, is energy. And so we want to maintain that high energy level. So that's another thing that those recorded phone conversations do. Also, during those, normally you're going to see if that's a 10%er.
Yeah.
So that lets me know, like, hey, this is somebody. Not to say the 60% we're recruiting, the average Joes, but that 60% we've seen too many times, even in THLT, that 60%, once you bring them into your culture, once you give them the right tools, they're quickly a 10%, but they weren't a 10% in the hiring process, you know, and that's something I think a lot of us as leaders kind of lose sight of. So for me, I've got that 60% I'm recruiting, right? And I see, I'll pick up the phone sometimes and I'll hear these pre-recorded responses and I'll be like, oh, wow, that's an Alivia Roberts. Like, I need to call this person. And you know, often those will kind of change and kind of steer our recruiting path for them. Yeah. And then on the back end, after they've completed all that, we also do, I don't know if y'all do this in THLT, in Lilly Roofing, we do like a discovery call. It's a really quick call to be mindful of their time. I don't want to sit here and the reason I've matured so much in this process is I've wasted hours sitting at a table like this, me and you, chairs across from us, and we're like, were they supposed to be here at 9? Yeah, 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No call, no show. You know, I wasted hours of my time doing that. And there were some that would call, but they always call like 10 minutes before the interview. And I'm like, well, that's great. My day's wasted, you know? So right out the gate, we lay out the 3 most uncomfortable questions. Like, are you good with commission only? That's question number one Jamie does to filter out a lot of our salespeople. Now we do have a W-2 sales rep role now within our company. But for a long time, commission only was the only offer. And so that's question number one, because I don't want Jamie on the phone either. We've already wasted approximately about 2 hours it takes to shortlist our candidates. So I don't want Jamie wasting 30 minutes, 40 minutes of her time on the phone with somebody and then be like, hey, I don't think you should even interview them. So Jamie does the 3 uncomfortable questions, does a slight discovery call. Hey, just to be clear, this is what this position consists of. Okay. It takes her about 5 minutes to do that call. So ultimately in an average hiring class, Jamie has invested about 4 hours of her time total, which is huge compared to used to. It was like 24 hours, I think. Like literally a whole week of her time was going towards whether it was the interviewing, whether it was the recruiting, like it was just a nightmare. So Jamie now does about 2 to 4 hours of her time, full investment. She then brings me a list. We schedule out our Zooms. We do everything through Zoom now. We don't do a lot of in-person interviews. There will be some in-person interviews. It just depends on the candidate. Some candidates, especially with our guys, for some reason we have really the people in rural areas have like taken a liking to joining Lilly Roofing, and a lot of it has to do with our technology and stuff. It makes it easy for them to work. So we've attracted a lot of those candidates, but with those candidates that are out in Gilbert, Louisiana, which is way, for those of you who don't know, it's like almost in Mississippi. With those candidates, the Zoom interview just makes sense. So we'll hop on a quick Zoom interview. I take about 30 minutes with each candidate. So my time now invested in the hiring strategy has dropped from about 40 hours total, because used to I was in every part, and I finally am able to kind of delegate a little bit of that. So now from 40 hours total in the hiring process, my time's at about roughly, for a hiring class, 6 hours. Yeah. Because I've got, multiple interviews. I'll do 30-minute intervals. So hopefully 12 candidates is an ideal. Out of those 12, we look to hire between 2 and 5. Yeah. So, so as far as Indeed's worked really well for us. But the problem with using tools like Indeed, LinkedIn, Facebook, if you're going to use them, you have to put steps in there to filter out a lot of those 30%. Yeah. Or else you're just going to waste so much time.
That's right. Well, and to filter out as well as make certain, because there's also fake jobs on there. So there are people out there that are looking for jobs that they get frustrated because, or they don't even know if they're applying for a job that somebody's hiring for. So, that's so having multiple avenues of hiring, making sure people know that you're looking to hire, and making sure, that you're letting people know, like, look, if you know somebody that's awesome, I don't know that we're going to be a fit, but introduce them to me, because whether it's an opportunity here, there, or other, it can be a great fit. Something that you said about energy, and I did want to go back to this. So I'm real big about energy as well. And the thing is don't think, if you're watching this, don't think that your energy has to be, oh my God, yay, woo. Okay, now,
most cases that won't even get you a call back.
Somebody that's like a high DI or an SC, like everybody's energy is going to be different. So we're not looking for, we used to talk about this a lot when I would go and I would train all over the US, and there was me, and at the time, I'm not sure how many they have now, but at the time we had like 150,000 agents in the organization, and we had, I think I was like the 32nd coach, not the 32nd coach, but 32 people at that time that was on the road traveling and teaching this course. And one of the things, because I had been through the course several times, and I was also, so you did have some of the trainers who were like, their energy was high, they're jumping on the table, they're pumping you up. Then you had people that their energy was their voice, and how, so whether you're an employer looking at this or you're an employee, the big thing when we talk about energy is, do you sound like a dead fish? Hey, well, I don't know. Right, like, no, but we're also, you don't have to sound, it's not bubbly. Like, when we say energy, we don't necessarily mean bubbly either. We just mean, like, when you answer do you answer the questions like you're answering, like I would want you to talk to a client, right? And So again, not overly nice. I love kind people. Nice, I don't care. Does that make sense? So like,
Do you answer the questions like you're interested in the conversation?
Yes.
Because the interested in the conversation part's what we're looking for. A lot of the people in our organization are quiet people.
Yeah.
Like I say a lot, probably about 50-50 now. We have a 50-50 share of Bossier office, killing it right now. They're doing incredible. But the two guys over there, nothing against them. They're just quiet people, but they bring an energy to the conversation to where they're interested, they're involved. So that's what we mean by energy.
Yes, I think of Woods Watson. He's one of the pastors at First West, and he's actually the only reason I ever went back the second time, because I had, like, you go to a church and you fill out like I'm a new member or whatever.
Yep.
First West does a really good job, or at least they used to, of like reaching out and saying, hey, you came, thank you for coming. Can we answer any questions? Can we pray for you? Could you come back? Right. I talked to like 2 people and they were fine. Then I talked to Woods Watson. And when you talk to that guy, or whether it's on the phone or in person, you just feel like he's giving you a big old hug. And I mean, and again, very appropriate. I mean, he just has that energy of like listening to you, and that he's just this great guy. And he did that when I did come back that second time, because he told me and that's the other thing, he asked questions. He found out like a bit about me and suggested a class and things like that. So connected me with people. And then he came in that day that I showed up, and came in and shook my hand. But so that's the energy. Like, are you, now with that said, y'all have heard Harrison and I talk sometimes. I tend to, like, I'll have sometimes people will say, and I'm always surprised by this, but I'll get to know somebody and they'll later be like, I kind of thought you were, an ass. And I'm like, what energy will I think of friendly, but apparently my face does not always say friendly. And
I struggle with the same problem, so I get your feeling.
Yeah, well, and I get tunnel vision, so like I'll walk into the office,
absolutely,
and I'm going to do this thing. I might pass 3 people, and I'm thinking like, I saw you yesterday. Like, if you need me, tell. But so I've had to like. But so I also don't mean, like, if you're somebody like me with tunnel vision, don't feel like you still can be you. Just make certain that you're answering it in a way that I love how you said that. Are you actually interested in this conversation?
Yep.
Because so that's the big piece, I think.
Yeah. Jamie actually, I feel like this happens way more often than what it should. But Jamie actually has a habit of, like, I'll feel like I'm having a really good day. And like you said, I'll have tunnel vision. I'll be getting tasks done. I'll be knocking out everything. And I'm like, man, I'm just killing it today. I'm in such a good mood. And Jamie, every time that's happened, like in the last 2 months, probably 4 or 5 times now, where I've just had really hyper productive days. Like you, I'm like, I feel great, And Jamie's like, something wrong with you today? Like, and I'm like, no, I'm good. And she's like, and I'm like, I'm good. And this is somebody that works with me every day. You know, I'm like, I promise you I'm good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm actually in a good mood right now. Yeah. Like, kind of crippling my mood.
Yeah. Well, and then it's also like, so it's always right. It's funny. Like, so we focus a lot on the person who talks a lot dominates the conversation. The person that asks questions controls the conversation. Well, in sales and a lot of times with people, you want to ask questions. Now, not from like a, but like be interested in that person and ask questions. And when I get tunnel vision, I tend to not do that. So my workaround, when let's say I'll coach, and I'll do that where I'll get off a coaching call sometimes, and especially when I was first starting coaching, and I'd be like, that was an awesome call. And then I go back and listen to it. And I'm like, oh, that's because I talked the whole time. So I felt good. And yet they didn't. And so sometimes I would get off of so then I was having to change my mindset around that. I'd get off a call and I'm like, they talked the whole time. Now, not just about random stuff, but they were and then I'm like, oh, are they going to think that I wasn't a good coach because like they self-discovered through that call what they needed. And then you go, no, that is my job as the coach, is to help them ask the right questions, put them in the right place where they can self-discover these pieces. And so it is very interesting. And then like in the office, I'll have to, like, I now tell people a couple of things when I start working with them. Like, number one, I tend to be loud. I'm not yelling at you. I can't hear myself. Like, matter of fact, I was last night right before bed, my mom's moving in because she's had some health issues, and I was doing some things. And I didn't realize, like, I was like, okay, I'm going to go clean this and do this. And, like, do you need anything for a leave? And I stopped. I said, how loud am I being? And she's like, pretty loud. And I'm like, that wasn't my, like, because I get the more excited I get, the louder I get, or the more, like, quick pace. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like that, because I wasn't yelling at her. I wasn't mad. I just loud. So number one, I let people know, like, if I'm talking loud because I can't hear it, I just want you to say, which is funny enough, an ADHD thing, because I can hear. It's just can't always hear myself, or can't regulate my voice. And so my thing I'll tell people is, like, just say, hey, Olivia, the window's open. It's a big joke. I won't go into that. But then that'll let me know, like, oh, I'm being too loud. But I also don't feel like you're treating me like a kid going, shh, I don't like that. But anyway, so then I'll bring my level down. So I have to tell people that. And
Window's
then
open.
The window's open, yeah. It was very funny.
Well, Joe had a moment where I was talking, because I do the same thing. And I was talking one day, and he's like, and I was like, what is it, Joe? Because if you've ever said in one of our classes or something, you've seen it a lot. Joe has a way of distracting me and getting me off topic. I'll just be like, I'll sit in there and I'm like, one day I did a seating chart, not to get too far off topic here, but one day I did a seating chart, and it literally had not Joe, not Joe, not Joe, not Joe, not Joe, like all the way down the table. End,
yeah. He's great for energy, but absolutely, because he's funny. And so he'll say horrible. Something and then that makes sense.
He literally
not
was
Joe,
like,
not Joe.
I'm just laughing because it sounds like you were raised in a train station. Yeah. And I'm like, I can't stand you, dude.
Yes. So I tell them that. The other thing is that I tell them is, I let them know that sometimes when I'm working, I'm tunnel visioned, and it has nothing to do with them.
That's good. I should probably do that.
And I also, now the flip side of that is, I also tell people, and I do this a lot. I said, look, feedback is very important to me. So if I do something that you don't like, don't feel like you have to wait to talk to me or whatever. It is 100% okay for you to go, are we good? Because that'll trigger me to go, oh, I'm sorry. No, I was thinking about, like, this other thing has, and I do a lot of feedback. So if I ever, and this is learned and things, so like, if I don't like what you're doing, I'm not going to wait to say it. I'm going to say it right then. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do it where I can embarrass you or anything, but I'll use the example of, Jade. She was 21 or something at the time, and I was running an office, and I was also still traveling and training, and so somebody was looking for me, and I overheard her. And again, nothing was wrong in this conversation. It's just there's a way to say it, and then there's a better way or a more effective way that sets you up for the future better. And he couldn't find me, and he was like, said something to the effect of, like, yeah, it's really hard to get her or something. And she affirmed it, and she was like, yeah, I know. Again, she was doing a good job. I heard it, and ended up stepping out, talking to him or whatever, lined it up, and then I said, hey, and I said it like right then. And this is why I love Jade so much, is she took it because I'd already had these other conversations. I said, look, there's nothing wrong with what you said. I said, I just want you to make sure that you're setting me and you up for better. I said, because he said, wow, it's hard to get in touch with Olivia. You affirmed it. He's fine right now. Well, because what he's looking for me wasn't important. But let's say that you keep affirming that, then it becomes Olivia's so busy that she's too busy for me, and it doesn't feel good for the people that are working with me. And it's not true, because I will make time. But it also, there was no appointment there or anything. So I said, so next time that happens, what's a better way that you could say that? And she's like, Oh, Olivia's always available for, appointments, or if it's an emergency, we can get in touch with her.
Yeah.
Right. And so just redirecting, because again, in that moment, it didn't matter. He was happy. She was happy. It was fine. But what are you setting yourself up for later?
Snowball effect.
Snowball effect.
Sure.
And so that's what I let people know. Like, I'm going to say it immediately. Like, the lady that works with me now, she's a virtual assistant, and she's awesome. She's in Baton Rouge. And if I feel like there's something off, I'll just ask her, hey, like, I thought such and such and such and such. And sometimes it's me. She's like, no, remember, look at the sheet. Here, I'm waiting on you. I have asked you about it twice. I'm like, okay, great. Sometimes it's her, but whichever, we nip it in the bud. So I'm all about, like, let's take care of it right now so you never have to wonder where you sit with me.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not saying that and you're working for me, that means I like you. And then now I also have I have also built in a system to make sure that I give kudos to people, because that tends to be, that was something I used to be very weak at. And now, so I've built it in to remind myself to say, like, when somebody does something over and above board, or they did the next level or whatever, that I'm acknowledging them for that, because everybody likes that. Me
And
too, right?
as a leader, I mean, we should constantly focus on catching them when they're winning, because it's really easy to catch people when they're losing, especially when we're constantly trying to build our systems and processes and get everybody to adapt and adjust. So I used to be really bad about that as well. I'd hire people and we'd go through the onboarding. I'd teach them stuff. And then naturally you're looking for everything they're doing wrong. And you don't mean to do that, but you're
That's right.
naturally looking for everything they're doing wrong. So you set them up for success, and then it's constant correction, and you're not catching them when they're wins. So naturally your organization slowly starts not necessarily full on resentment, but I mean, it's definitely there.
Yeah. Well, and then you never get to win. So I'm also, and this was John Prescott, phenomenal guy. He taught me this through one of the trainings, because this is what he does, and it's so great. Couple things is, let's say that I did a whole presentation for you and you were coaching me around it. You could probably go through and tell me 15 different things, no matter how great it is, that I could do better, right? Well, the problem is I can't fix 15 different things at one time. So
Right.
So it was, what are 3 things they did well? What's one thing they can improve on? And so I try to keep that in mind. So,
That's good.
yeah.
I like that.
And so, because again, like, I work my systems, right? So that's the other piece is, and I do think, now granted, are there some people that just don't care? Sure. I think for the most part, people that absolutely don't care, they're probably dealing with something over here that has completely zapped them. I do believe that most people, they're doing the best they can or the best they know how to. And so and I know for me, there's nothing worse than, like, let's say you do something and you think it's good, you've poured your heart and soul into it, and then somebody come along and be like, well, that sucks. What?
You should try this or
That's
this.
right.
And you're like,
yeah. And so you kind of like start where they are and bring them up. I'm 42 years old. I've painted for the first time in my life, like a wall, right, at my house. During COVID, I decided I used the skill saw for the first time in my life. I got bored and I tore a lot of shit up.
still got all your fingers. That's good.
That's right. But my younger brother, he's a handyman, and I didn't even realize until I was thinking about it yesterday how well he did teaching me this, because so like when I would ask him about something, he would tell me how to do that thing. And whenever, so like the other day I decided that I was going to put some trim in my house, or like, I think it's called trim. It's like the molding at the bottom of the,
Like the shoe molding.
shoe molding. Thank you. And, so that's how much I know about it, right? I didn't even know what it's called.
I'm a construction guy. I would get literally crucified if I didn't know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like I've literally Googled trim, shoe molding, crown molding, like what's the difference? So he gave me, like, he said, here, you can cut it with this. And the next thing he's going to teach me is to use the nail gun. It's going to be fun.
So you did trim boards around a room, and you what's the best way of asking this? You actually made it meet in the corners?
So this is the cool part. So yes, so this was so I had to do,
that needs to be its own podcast.
Yeah.
You giving a tutorial on how to run.
Especially because, like, look, my brain doesn't work with like 45-degree angles or something. I watched a video, somebody's making fun of somebody.
Well, you can also do 45, and it still don't equal 90
yes.
sometimes.
Yes. Well, and then it has to, but this, and then the painting. So like what he, like, so I did it. I did the 45 and I watched a YouTube video on it. Right. And I didn't have one of the tools, but I got it pretty close. And so when I showed it to him, of course, I'm proud, like a 5-year-old kid that learned, I got no shoes. I ran fast and I didn't realize that, but I was like, look, and he was like, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, oh, that's really good. Like, and then he gave me one piece of constructive criticism. I'm sure he could have like went on for days,
probably.
But yeah. And then the same thing, like when I first started painting, like I would paint it and then he would give me like one or two, like this or that, type things, or filling in like the, with the wood or whatever. He's like the first time I filled something in with wood, he told me what to do and he left. I didn't realize that you need to I didn't realize how much work I was leaving him because I put big chunks. And so then you got to sand all of those. And it was something that was like, it was sheetrock. So you know how like there's a lot of nails in sheetrock and and so he could have said, which may have been what I wanted to say, like, are you serious? It's going to take me 2 hours. Instead, he was like, okay, hey, great. You got them all done. He said, next time, you can use a little bit less and just kind of do this. And I was like, great. So I learned it. I didn't feel resentment because he told, so like that's
he only corrected them.
Yeah. And he just enough for me to still be interested in doing more. And acknowledging what I did do. And what I did do is what he said. I just didn't understand, I just didn't know yet. So that's so that I look at it a lot of that way. So like meet them where they are. So if that's the first time, like say your salesperson has done something, what did they do right? Because especially, let's say it's the first time they've made a sales call, the first time they went and knocked on somebody's door, that took something just to do it.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, first thing I want to say is let me tip my hat to the fact that you did it. You are already like outpacing everybody else that wanted to and never did. So you're like, let's acknowledge that's the hardest part. Yeah. And sometimes we take those for granted. But that's the hard, you did it. Now, what do you think you did well? Because we're also like, how are we teaching people to think, right? To become leaders themselves. And, what did you do well? Great. And what's one thing based on what you did today that you would do the same, and what would you differently? Well, the same, I would do X. 100%. Differently, I feel like I stumbled on this. Great. Do you have the resources to learn better? No, yes, and then you can come alongside of and help them, right? So that's because even like now I've got to put the trim. I cut the trim and I've got to like put it in, and Melvin's worried about my fingers, so he was like, "You gonna watch some YouTube videos first, right?" And I was like, "Well, yes, and I'm gonna have you show me how to use that first,
One hand on the finish gun at all times.
That's what he said. He's like, the other hand over here. But yeah, so I think that's and something that you mentioned, and as we wrap up, I do want to point this out. You have to have a great hiring process. And by the way, it's not going to be great when you start it. Just document it. It'll get better. And don't wait till it's great, or it'll never get great, because you got to like do it and change it and do it. Have a onboarding process, and then have a training process, because you will lose amazing people because your onboarding process sucks, or your training sucks, or you're not connecting with them. And then also you've got to be able to weed out the people that aren't right for your organization, because people will also leave if, they're hanging out with a bunch of turkeys and they're an eagle, right? So make certain that you have those pieces. And that's one of the reasons why, if this is the first time you've done it, don't go there alone. There's books, there's coaches, there's courses. Contact me. There's go shadow people in your world that do this type of thing. And now come from contribution. Don't just suck up their time, right? And yet, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Don't have to be alone in it.
You don't have to be alone in it, and you can get better and be okay. I loved, there was a Rachel Hollis quote that said, be okay sucking at it until you're better at it, or something like that. I'm like, it really is. Like,
It's
you
true,
don't,
though.
yeah, if you got to get comfortable being bad at it and learning about it as fast as possible.
Yeah, my first 2 to 3 years, I guess, in leadership, management, ownership, even was spent trying to figure a lot of stuff out. And in the last, like, probably 4 years of my career, I have ultimately found just asking a simple question has saved me months. So I've invested a lot of time and money in getting better at this, but also in just asking those questions. So, like you said, like, if you have something you're trying to work on, especially a hiring process, call people that do it. Me and you, I mean, and Amy would be a good one as well.
Yeah.
I literally process 60 applicants a month on average. And through those, you know, I've been able to really build, especially with the help of Jamie, a system that works and it streamlines everything. So I'm not wasting too much of my time, and nobody really has to reinvent that, you know,
That's right.
and it's constantly getting better because we are keeping those retains and we're getting rid of the stuff that we don't need in it. But
yeah. So if you're watching this and you are interested in some of these systems or having a consultation or conversation, make a comment on this and just say, contact me. We'll send you a private message. We'll send you an email. Because there are certain things that I have that they're free resources that we put together that I want to share with people, because even if somebody goes through a process and it's a good process with somebody else, it actually helps all of us, because we don't want people that are looking for a job to just get so jaded that they can't have any excitement about everything, because they're like, man, I've put in 100 applications. I'm a pretty cool catch, and I'm jumping through all these hoops and nobody's calling me back. You know, like it's depressing.
Yeah.
So when people have good experiences, it helps us all. So, again, drop in the comment if you have questions. Any questions that we didn't answer, drop in the comments. We'd be happy to do additional podcasts around that, or the next time we do a training at the board or something like that. I said the board, I meant the chamber or something, you know, or online. We'll be happy to invite you to it. With that said, we are going to wrap up. Now, I know that Harrison and I finally got a good high five.
oh, y'all worked on it?
We worked on it on camera. So
We accidentally nailed one, but
yeah. So we're gonna see how this works.
this is your opposite hand though.
No, well, that's right. But I'm right-handed, so usually.
So this might work.
So I think this might work.
Okay.
So we're gonna blame it on Harrison.
Let's take it out.
Woo! Oh wait, one more, because we gotta do the whole let's go. Let's go.